Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvah zah v'tzivonu nahagnet nehasher Shabbat.
Amen.
May a new light shine upon Zion, and may we be worthy to see its splendor. On this day, may we see the world in a new light. On this day, let us be freed from desire for gain, from ambition for material things. On this day, let us look beyond time and space towards eternity and know the blessing of peace.
Thank you. You see to me already, I'll see to you. We read from Psalm 84. How lovely are your dwelling places, God. My soul longs and yearns for your courts.
My heart and flesh sing for joy to you, the living God.
As the sparrow finds a home and the swallow has a nest where she may lay her young. Happy are those who dwell in your house. Happy are those who find their strength in you. Passing through the driest valley, they find it a place of springs. They go from strength to strength. God of the hosts of heaven, hear my prayer. One day in your courts is but 1,000 elsewhere.
I would rather stand at the threshold of your house than recline in tents of wickedness.
Eternal God, you are a sun and a shield.
Your gifts are grace and glory.
You withhold no good thing from those who walk uprightly.
Eternal good of the hosts of heaven. Happy are those who trust in you.
Do you know a tune for this? Well, let's do Lecha Dodi on page 91. Lecha Dodi lekrat kala, Panei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor v'dibor echad, Yishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad, Oshamo echad, L'shemo letiferet v'litla. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi lekrat kala, Panei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi lekrat kala, Panei Shabbat nekabela. Rat Shabbat lecho v'nelcha, Ki makor habracha, Mirosh mikedem nesocha, Sof ma'aseh b'machashav v'techila. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi lekrat kala, Panei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi lekrat kala, Panei Shabbat nekabela. Itorori, Kiva ore, Kumi ori, She'edaberi, Kavod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi lekrat kala, פני שבת נקבלה, לחרוני לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי בשלום העטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת מקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת מקבלה. Baruch Hu, the call to prayer. Baruch Hu en Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Let us be seated. We praise you, eternal one, our God, sovereign of the universe, whose word brings on the evening, whose wisdom opens heaven's gates, whose understanding changes times and seasons, and whose will sets their stars in their courses in the sky. You make day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light. You make day pass and bring on the night, and separate day from night. You rule the hosts of heaven. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. We praise you, O God, whose word makes evening fall. Ahavat olam be'Yisrael, Amecha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu lemarata. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shokbeinu ובקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגע יומם בלילה, נגע יומם בלילה. אהבתך אל תסור ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד, שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם, לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשתם לאות על ידך, והיו לו תותפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר בארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אדוני אדוני אלוהיכם. When we witnessed your power, we praised your name and gave thanks. Willingly we accepted your rule, then full of joy we sang together. נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות וספלת, נורא תהילות וספלת. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. נאמר כי יפדה אדוני את יעקב ולא מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. Let us read together. Grant, eternal God, that we may lie down in peace.
Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us to give wise counsel and in the legislative of your love. Shield us from sickness and war, from famine and distress, and keep us from wrongdoing. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, for you are our guardian and deliverer, the gracious and merciful God. Guard our coming out and our going in, that now and always we may have life and peace.
Baruch atah Adonai, haparei sukat shalom, aleinu v'al kol yoshvei tevel. We praise you, O God. May your sheltering peace descend on us and all who dwell on earth. Shabbat tifach ufia giteilatecha. Eternal God, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, v'Konei HaKol, v'Zochacha Avot v'Imahot, u'Mevi Geula livnei v'neihem, למען שמו באהבה, מלך ומשיר מגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, וחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ברופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך על גבורות, עומד מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. You are holy, awesome is your name. We have no God but you. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. We praise you, Eternal One, the Holy God. Let us be seated in the middle of page 99. Shamu b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. כי שת ימים Adonai, Hashamayim v'naaretz, Ovayom hashvi'i, Shabbat, Shabbat, vayinafash, Shabbat, Shabbat, vayinafash, Shabbat, Shabbat, vayinafash. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh Shabbat. Praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. In the middle of page 100. Eternal God, be gracious to your people Israel, in your love accept their prayers. May our worship now and always be acceptable in your sight. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadecha, bi'era na'avod. We praise you, O God, whom alone we worship in reverence. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu, v'Elohei avotenu le'olam va'ed. Tzur chayenu magen yish'enu, atahu lador vador. Nodeh lecha u'nesaper et hilatecha, al chayein hamshrim biyadecha, al nishmoteinu pudot lach, al nisecha shebechol yom imanu, al niflootecha v'tovatecha, shebechol eit erev avoche v'tzoharayim. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha lecha na'el hadot. We praise you, God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due. Supreme source of peace, grant true and lasting peace to your people Israel. For it is good in your sight that your people Israel and all peoples may be blessed at all times with your gift of peace. Baruch atah Adonai, osei hashalom. Some moments of silent prayer. Yul ratzon imrefi, Yul ratzon imrefi, ve'hegon limi levonecha, ve'hegon limi levonecha, Adonai tzuri v'goali, Adonai tzuri v'goali. The vote which took place at 2:30 this afternoon in the House of Commons was I suppose, a bittersweet moment for me. As some of you will know, I have long been an advocate of assisted dying in certain circumstances, and that arises not primarily out of my personal experience, although my brother, when I was at university, was given morphine, which the purpose was to keep him out of pain, but actually we knew that it also hastened his death. But that's what we call the double jeopardy, about which most people are in agreement. That if the purpose is to keep somebody out of pain, to give them a drug that keeps them out of pain, but the secondary result is it hastens their death, and that is, in most jurisdictions, in most people's minds, a relatively acceptable way of doing things. But, and I've worked in hospices, or in a hospice anyway, and in hospitals, as some of you know, and still work one day a week as a hospital chaplain. And so I've seen people dying, and I've seen people at death's door, and I've seen all the variations which
one could find, I suppose, like many others. I'm not alone in that at all. And a number of members of the House of Commons, some spoke from personal experience of their own family, which is not always a good measure upon which to create a law, but it should certainly set you thinking about whether the law should be changed or not. And of course, many people spoke with great experience of the health service, some, by the way, in favour and some against. It was always going to be a difficult and emotional debate, but I think in general it was carried out with dignity, with respect, with trying to listen and appreciate each other's point of view, even when one disagreed. And so overall, I think, despite the fact it's a relatively new parliament, with very many relatively new parliamentarians, actually the debate was a model of how Parliament can behave when it needs to. And if you haven't seen the debate, whichever side you fell on, it would be worth looking at. The bill now goes to what's called the committee stage, and that committee will take more evidence and try and tidy up the bill. It's not supposed to undermine the principle of the bill, although that can happen at third reading, that parliamentarians can change their mind if they don't like the final version and throw it out. And what was very interesting in all of the discussions was that primarily people are either against or for it, long before all the details. And certainly before the procedure, all this nonsense about I hadn't had long enough to debate it, it's been debated quite often for very many years now, at least a decade plus. I gave evidence to the Falconer Commission, whenever that was, many years ago. The procedure nonsense that it shouldn't come through a private member's bill was also a red herring. As we know, whether or not you prove it, abortion came through a private member's bill, changing divorce law came through by a private member's bill, decriminalisation, all sorts of homosexuality. What was it saying then?
Seatbelts.
See, all sorts of things that have led that we now think we either like or don't like, but nevertheless, we don't argue they went through the wrong procedure. And I think it was a bit of a red herring. And I think most parliamentarians were agreed, as I think I am, that this is a change. It is a change in the relationship between the state and its citizens, and particularly between the medical profession and its patients. But the medical profession has been moving from outright opposition to neutrality and slowly, mildly in favour. But even before one gets to the issue, I think there are two really important things that have happened, are happening, and will happen as a result of this. The first thing is that people will actually talk about death. I mean, it still amazes me that I meet people in all stages of their life who have not talked to their children about their, if they've got children or relatives or partners, or they haven't actually talked about what they think. Not that they can give a definite answer, but even had a conversation. And I don't think my parents ever spoke to each other about their deaths. And that may be partly generational, maybe partly that their own parents had lived in the through the First World War, they lived in the Second World War, but it still strikes me as remarkable that people haven't had a discussion. Laura and I have lots of discussions about it, and I've also had discussions with my children about it. And as it happens, I'm fascinated by the concept of my own death in a sort of intellectual sense. And I just can't get my head around the fact that I won't be here. And however hard I try, you know that one day you won't be. I know intellectually I know one day I won't be here, but I just can't imagine what it'd be like. And it's really hard for me, and I'm fascinated, but I can't have a sense of what it will be like. And that's, I suppose, fine, because nobody can tell me. But so I think the fact that we might actually talk about what we want, should we be facing our death, is an important step. And the second important step is, again, it's a bit of a red herring, but it's not wholly a red herring, is that I hope it will force us to talk more about palliative care in the hospice system. Hospice system, if you've ever been into hospice or met people, it's a great system. But it's only funded 30% by the NHS. The rest is raised by charities and appeals and all the other things. And hospice care and palliative care need to be invested in, partly because if we're going to give people a genuine choice, we don't want it to be on the basis there's not hospice around, that palliative care is no good, therefore I'm going to take the other. Better, you should say, there's great hospice care if I want it. There's great palliative care, although I think even palliative care practitioners will quietly tell you, they won't tell you in public, privately will say they can't deal with every challenge, but they won't say that in public. But nevertheless, it will force, I suspect, more investment in palliative care, because if you're going to choose the other, it's not a choice if it isn't available. And so I think, regardless of what you think about the bill itself, the two things that will, I think, be very positive. One, people will talk about what we mean by the end of our lives. And secondly, there'll have to be more conversation about how we support hospices and palliative care. I have to say that whilst I understand the pragmatics, I think the bill is a bit too restrictive in some ways. So that's that, if you like, the bitterness, by which I mean how one defines when one is terminally ill is a debatable point. And secondly, the procedure whereby you have to go through one independent doctor and another independent, and then a judge, seems to me to be going a bit over the top. That, I mean, some judges may be skilled, most judges are not skilled in this area at all. I mean, the doctors are obviously, but the judges are not skilled, and I'm not sure what the judicial level would add, except to make us feel more safe, which is a good thing. But I cannot imagine judges really saying to two independent doctors, are you sure you've done this right? Are you sure that you haven't, you've checked on coercion and all those things? And I think it will become a paper stamping thing by a family court judge. That is, should we have enough of them to actually do the work? And I suspect that that will eventually be dropped. I think it will stay originally in the bill, but like I think it was in Australia, they withdrew it in the end because they realised it wasn't sensible. It didn't make sense in terms of protecting people from coercion. But let's be clear, doctors have to protect people from coercion all the time. Doctors and nurses, medical practitioners and religious practitioners I can speak personally where I've been in situations where I've had to, as it were, help somebody arrive at their own decision rather than the decision they think their children want of it. So I'm aware that's a dilemma, a very difficult dilemma, and teasing that out is a very difficult thing to do. But it's possible with skilled practitioners, religious practitioners, spiritual practitioners, and medical practitioners. So, I mean, I haven't spoken about this much in this congregation, I have spoken about it in other congregations, and I think the public probably, in principle, is in agreement with most, although my local MP voted against, my new local MP, despite my lobbying of him, voted against. I haven't managed to yet speak to him and ask him what, I mean, he doesn't tell me why, but I hope he would tell me why. And I suspect he, like a number of the new young members of Parliament, was a bit nervous about it all, which is understandable and should be the case. We should be nervous about the provision, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. And I'm happy to hear if anybody wants to add any comments. But I watched quite a lot of the debate today. I was particularly moved by a number of doctors who spoke, mainly in favour, but interestingly enough, two Conservative doctors, doctors of Conservative members of Parliament, and one whom I know, Peter Prinsley, who's the MP for Norwich South, who's very active in the Jewish community there, and somebody called Offer, who I'm guessing is Jewish. I mean, I could be wrong, he was called Jacob Offer. He didn't say he was Jewish, so I don't know if he was Jewish. I haven't seen him outed anywhere as a Jewish MP. But He was a doctor as well, so that must make him Jewish, really, mustn't it? Jacob offered as a doctor. Also movingly, about, in their case, at least one of them said, there are things that we doctors still can't do, save us from. We think the doctors can do everything for us, but sometimes they can't. And, happy to open it if anybody's got any comments they want to make.
Just say that all my years as a district nurse, caring for many, many, many terminally ill people, I don't ever remember, and seeing many, many, many people die, I never remember hearing anybody say or express during their terminal illness that they would like to bring their death forward. They will have the same experience.
I think that's true, but I do think the conversation has changed. I mean, I think
palliative care was better back in the day.
I think that's absolutely right. I think 20 years ago, not many people who had things like muscular dystrophy and those things, which are very frightening and debilitating. Ultimately, if you want a peaceful death, you're unlikely to get it if you suffer from those two, for example. There was not this big campaign, however, on their part. So I think there has been a movement in the dial of what the public's prepared to talk about. First of all, what the public's prepared to talk about, what they're prepared to ask for. So I think probably if you were nursing today, you might have a different experience. I don't know that for certain. And I think the challenge is that people who end up in Parliament, of course, most of them are no longer practicing. That's not always true, by the way. It's not always. We do have some very good parliamentarians who they're allowed to, there's the thing about they shouldn't have second jobs, but if they're in what I call a professional job, they're allowed to continue to practice. And I think, so I think what people are prepared to talk about, what people are prepared to ask for has changed. And what they're prepared to speak about in front of their medical professionals may have changed too. But I take the point that, the idea that thousands of people are going to demand this, I think is probably not true. The numbers will be small.
I think quality of life comes into it as well, not just the illness. It's the quality of life a person has. They may not have a terminal illness as such, but they may have an illness where they're not going to get any better, and their quality of life is non-existent.
That is a challenge. The 6 month terminal, even if you could decide when 6 month terminal was, of course there are always examples of people they say you're going to die in 6 months, they live for 10 years. And people they say, well, you've probably got 6 months. No doctor will actually tell you, of course. People think the doctor said to them 6 months or 3 months or 2 years, but an intelligent medical practitioner will never say, you've got. They'll hedge it with all sorts, on the basis of what I've seen, and it's likely, but that, understanding people go away and they tell their family, I realised with my shoulder is now healed. And I realised the doctor said to me, you must have done everything we asked of you. And I went home and I said to Laura, the doctor was very pleased with me, which is not actually the same thing. You realise that actually you don't need to, there's no malice, but you can actually misinterpret or put a gloss on what somebody, particularly your medical practitioner, tells you about your length of life. And most honest medical practitioners would say it's pretty difficult. And I've seen it even when you see the way people are breathing, you think they can't go on breathing like this for more than 24 hours. Things I when I only work 1 day a week in the hospital, so I think I'm going to be there when I come back in a week's time. And lo and behold, they are still breathing at this very shallow. So it is a difficult one. It really is a difficult one about quality of life. And of course, the biggest challenge is by the time our life has deteriorated such we don't want to live it anymore, we're no longer capable of saying what we want. That's the big challenge. And there's no suggestion that people who cannot articulate what they want can be bumped off. There's no, even if they pre-said, see the problem with a lot of my conversations, we've said, if we get to this stage, do the pillow, right? But your instinct would be to say, you're at this stage now, do you want me to do the pillow? And probably at that point I can't answer the question anyway. So these are not easy things. I mean, we may joke about them because that's one of our ways of facing them, but they're not easy things to do.
I'm interested to see what will happen when it goes to the Lords, because of course we have 26 elected Church of England bishops.
Yes, 3 have just been named in a report, yes.
Right.
5 of them actually.
Right. I mean, when Kay talks about how it used to be, and I wonder, we've become a more secular society, perhaps the dial has shifted on that also, and whether the Lords will be something of an obstacle to this and throw it out, and it will have to go back and forth anyway to the Commons, and they can reject the Lord's decision. But I wonder whether that will start throwing up questions of separation of church and state.
Well, it's interesting because the Lords was in favour originally. It was more better received in the Lords than it was in the Commons originally. Falcon's bill started, for example, Lord Falcon in the Lords. And George Carey, who was a former Archbishop of Canterbury, was very opposed at one time and has come round in favour. Justin Welby, in common with the United Synagogue Chief Rabbi, of course, came out and said it was a terrible thing. But any movement on the part of society that you can bank on the Orthodox Chief Rabbi, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Catholic Cardinal Archbishop, and all sorts of other conservative religious leaders will come out and oppose it as a matter of principle. And I think we should respect people who. It's a perfectly respectable argument to say my faith says life is to be lived until it naturally ends. That's okay. It's a perfectly respectable position. I'm not sure it's respectable that should be imposed upon me if I don't share the same faith as them. And I'm not sure that it's helpful when people like the Justice Secretary and the Health Secretary say things which can be misinterpreted. Each of them is entitled to a private opinion as a Member of Parliament, but when you speak with an office, particularly the Justice Office that will be involved in the Health Department, it's a different challenge. But I think to your question, I think there are many people who are, and in fact Harriet Harman's going to put down an amendment on the churches, the bishops coming out. There's a motion coming to the House of Lords to remove the final 92 or 9, I can't remember, 92 hereditary peers. I suspect will be passed. And she's put down an amendment to include the Church of England. And I think that's right, actually. I think there should be people representing religion in the House of Lords. But there's no reason at all why it should be 12 Church of England bishops and nobody else. At one time it was. At one time most of the country was Church of England. But actually, we should have somebody who represents the Sikh community and somebody who represents the Hindu community, if they're prepared to accept. Somebody who represents the Catholic community. Not there because they happen to be a Catholic, but by virtue of the post they hold. And certainly if you're going to do that for the Church of England, which I know there's an issue of establishment, you probably need to do it for other faiths or not at all. I think it's a bit of an anachronism now to... and by the way, the same group who oppose, Conservative leaders who oppose the assisted dying bill will also oppose removing the Church of England bishops. Last time it was suggested, again, United Synagogue Chief Rabbi, Catholic Archbishop of Canterbury, all lined up with the Catholic Archbishop of Westminster and the Archbishop of Canterbury, all lined up to oppose removing the Church of England bishops. And maybe sometimes it's about whether you're a conservative or liberal rather than your particular faith. But faith clearly plays a role and should play a role. I don't object to people saying, this is what my faith teaches me, and I certainly want that for me. Whether we should allow that to be, if I choose not to eat bacon, does that mean it shouldn't be sold in shops? Because it offends me if I see somebody eating it. That's a silly point. But the point is, we shouldn't be forced to do things against our religious tradition. The question is whether we should impose our religious tradition on others. And you can run a state on Christian lines, you can run the state of Israel on Jewish lines, without imposing it on the Arab population who are not sympathetic to it, or this population who are not sympathetic to it. So I think the role of religion has changed, and theocratic states tend not to be very good ones in the end. And one only has to look at Iran, Afghanistan, and others, and possibly the state of Israel continues on the way it's going. I see that Haredi population is up again, and they're not the ones fighting, they're refusing to fight in the army. My friends' children, your children, others go and fight for them. I think it'll be a challenging time. If liberals continue to lead Israel, the state will have, interestingly enough, the two major blocs will be the Arab bloc, which doesn't want a Jewish state, and the Haredi, which doesn't want a democratic state. It'll be an interesting time for the state of Israel. Today it's a sort of modern, democratic, liberal state, but if those two blocs come together in some way, you could end up with a theocratic style state and not a modern, democratic, liberal state. But that's a different point. Anyway, anybody else, and then I'm going to conclude. Well, if you get time, watch some of the debate. I mean, I think the parliamentarians were quite impressive. And it cut right across class, if such class such as this, political party, age. It was a very interesting debate. And there will no doubt be more.
We turn to the Kaddish on page 500 and, thank you, 24. As we rise and reflect on, here we are talking about death, but in fact Judaism is much more interested in life. That's one of the challenges, but it is also interested, maybe interested in death, but it's much more interested in life. And the Kaddish, just look at the words of the Kaddish, which is of course a doxology. It's about praising God. And was not originally written to do with deaths and funerals. It was written to end a period of study. We just had a very brief study on the bill and what might happen. And the Kaddish is about, I think, indirectly about affirming life. Because when you praise God, you're affirming something about life. And we think today of the following whose yahrzeits occur on this Shabbat: of Stephen McGrill, brother of Susan Jessel, of Valerie Shaw, mother of Mark, of Bernard Finley, father of Barbara Finley Kentish, and of Marilyn Finley, sister of Barbara Finley Kentish, of Harry Shanson, father of Lindsay, of Hetty Silver, mother of Daphne Stern, of Lily Rack, mother of Lucille Blaine, of Morris David Cohen, grandfather of David Shaw, of Renee Millstone, mother of Morris, of Stuart Lester, father of Elizabeth Seven, and of Sidney Harris, first husband of Carol Weinstein. Then we say Zichronom Levracha. May their memories serve as a blessing, as we, on behalf of those who think of them, together recite the Kaddish on page 524. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabba, ba'alma divra chirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon, v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kari v'imru, Yehei shemei rabba mavarach l'olam u'lamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ah v'tomam v'yitnaseh, v'tadam v'talev talal, Shemei Dukudisha Barichu. Le'ela min kol bechata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechamata, tamiran b'alma v'maru. Yehei shalom araba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'maru. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'asei shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei adam, v'maru. Amen. May great peace descend from heaven, and abundant life be granted to us, to all Israel, and to all the peoples of the world. And let us say, Amen. Let us be seated for a moment. We have a bar mitzvah tomorrow.
Our usual services in December, no Chavarah on the third one, which will be the 20th, I think, because we have a Chanukah Chavarah, 6:30 on the 27th, and then our service on the Shabbat following it on the 28th will begin at 11:30. There'll be a catered and bring your own, so both lunch, and we'll be going into tea and having a Hanukkah party. So, is that all right, Barbara? Yes? No?
No,
Oh, go on then, what?
no, I said you haven't missed.
Oh, I see. Right. The other thing I just wanted to get you to reflect on, I'm seeking volunteers to do a number of different things in the community. One is to volunteer to take a Friday evening service, occasionally. Second is to meet with Citizens UK and think about our social justice work. And the third one is I need someone to help organise our weekend away with the Gloucestershire community that's going to take place next May. So if you're interested in any of those and you want to talk to me about it, please do. Eventually we'll get something to the bulletin, but I'm going to start talking about all those three things so we can expand the work that we're doing. Now, who'd like to pick what we end with? Not you. In the congregation. Anybody like to choose?
Like it.
No, it's about whether I know it. Let me just find out what page it is. Can you play it, Maestro?
I can.
So you can do everything. It's me that's the problem.
Well, it's on page 651.
651. Erev shel Shoshanim, Neitzed Estan, Or Basimcha Ulvona, Leraglech Miftan, Laila Yored La'ed, Ruach Sosan Noshba, Averofesh Lashir Balat, Zemesh El Ahava, Shacha Hoba Yona, Roshech Malet Elalim, Michel Haboker Shoshana, Ektevenu Li, Erev Shel Shoranim, Neitzana El Habustan, O Basimcha Olvona, Leraglei Miftan. Well, we obviously need to learn that one better, don't we? So let's read it as we conclude. On an evening of roses, let us go out to the orchard where myrrh, spices and perfumes will be a carpet for your feet. Slowly descends the night and the perfumed wind is a caress. I whisper a quiet song to you, a song of love. At dawn a dove coos, and your head is covered with dew. Your mouth is a rose in the morning. Let me gather it to myself. Let us conclude with this verse. I invite you to stand. You will yet see how good it will be in the year that will come. Shabbat Shalom.